Has anyone ever heard of what happens on the 5th Wednesday of the month? My friend Krista just told me about it. I thought she was joking, but now I know that isn't true. Not every month has a 5th Wednesday, so it only happens occasionally. I did the maths, and most years have 4 months with 5 Wednesdays in them. Krista seemed surprised I'd never heard about this. She and her husband Mike were shocked, actually. They said everyone they know is aware of this and has been since childhood. Just in case you're out of the loop, like me, let me tell you about this phenomenon. Apparently on the 5th Wednesday of the month at 3 a.m, something happens. Maybe you sleep through it, and if so, you're one of the lucky ones. Krista said she and Mike always take sleeping pills that night just to ensure they don't wake up. If you do happen to wake up at 3 a.m, you'll find that you're alone. Everyone in the house has mysteriously vanished. Krista told me about the first time it happened to her. Her single mother was a heavy sleeper, so she had never warned her daughter about what could happen on this particular date. In the early hours of the 5th Wednesday, Krista woke up with a start. She said there was a feeling of intense darkness, like the moon and streetlights had been extinguished. She flicked on her bedside light and saw that her sister's bed on the other side of the room was empty. The blankets were tucked in neatly, like no one had slept there at all that night. Her sister was only 4, and she was instantly worried. She climbed out of bed and wandered down the hall, checking to see if she was in the bathroom maybe. The whole house was silent. The bathroom was vacant. Krista moved to her mother's room and saw that the bed there was neatly made. Nobody was home. Panicking, Krista grabbed the phone and tried to call her Aunt Jackie, who lived up the street. The phone rang and rang over and over. Every number she tried resulted in the same. I asked her what she did next, and she told me she went back to bed. She was terrified, but only 6 years old. She hid under the covers until morning and was surprised to find that her mother and sister were in the kitchen having breakfast, listening to the radio. Everything was perfectly fine. Mike told me of his first experience with this was pretty similar. His brothers warned him about it, but he wasn't sure he believed them until it happened to him. Mike actually went outside and tried knocking on his neighbors' doors, and no one answered. The streets were vacant, the traffic lights directing no one. The radio stations played static, white noise, with no one there to operate them. Apparently it gets worse over time. The first few times it happens to you, it's just like they described. I called up a couple of other friends after they talked with Krista and Mike, and they echoed their sentiments. Yes, this had happened to all of them. My friend Jen said that it was the 4th time, or maybe the 5th, when it started to change. It was a few years after her first experience. She didn't wake up every single 5th Wednesday, so it accrued gradually. It was the 5th Wednesday of July when she woke up at 3 a.m. Panic immediately set in, and she tried her best to fall back to sleep. The quiet was so thick it was palpable. As she laid in the bed in a completely silent house, something interrupted. A knock came on the door. Jen told me she'd been warned about this. Numerous older relatives and friends begged her to figure out some way to stay asleep after the first few minutes. Sure, it was spooky to be alone in your house, all alone in the world for a night. But things were going to get much worse. She didn't answer the door. The noise was absolutely shocking. Not even a dog was around on previous 5th Wednesdays. All the birds in the trees usually vanished. The fact that a knock could come out of the intense solitude was wrong. Jen is a brave woman, never one to back down from a challenge. She told me that she was shaking that night, but she grabbed a softball bat and walked to the door. She opened it a crack, looking out on the dark, empty street. That was it. She went back to bed, fell asleep, and things resumed normally the next day. Mike and Krista shared similar stories. They were each a bit older, when things escalated to this stage, but they had both gone through similar phantom knocks on the door after a few times of this happening. The 3 people I talked to told me once they had got to that point, their parents, or in Krista's case, her aunt, stepped in to make sure they never woke up on a 5th Wednesday again. The knock from no one is the last time. It's relatively safe, apparently. I asked Krista if you can stay up all night to avoid this from happening. She said maybe. Some people she knows have tried it, and it seems to negate it. The problem is that it chips away at their sanity over time. You can only do it every so often, otherwise it will break you down. Mike agreed. Everyone he knows who has attempted this method are struggling severely in pretty much every area of their life, the more they keep it up. All the other anecdotes come from people they know, friends of friends. See, most everyone is aware of this phenomenon, so they know to take their sleeping pills, drink some wine, or skip the sleep the nights leading up to it so they pass out for the night of the 5th Wednesday. Everybody knows. For those who tempt fate, or those who mess up in some way, the next 5th Wednesday, after the one where they knock, is critical. The knock comes again on this one, but this time, someone is at the door. The person at the door looks just like you. They share your physical appearance down to the last detail, the smallest freckles and the tiniest scars. They have your mannerisms, your physical strength, and are exactly the same condition as you in that moment. I guess a friend of Krista's who got to this point had a broken leg during that particular 5th Wednesday, and so did the identical person who knocked on the door. You have a choice whether to let them in or not. They don't force their way in. They stand there and wait while you make your decision. If you close the door on them, then it just keeps happening every 5th Wednesday that you wake up. They will come back again and again, waiting for you to make your choice. If you decide to let them come in, they pass by you without saying a word and then settle in your bed. They fall asleep. Krista told me this is just legend. Nobody she knows has done this. They keep closing the door. If you get to the point where your doppelganger shows up, then you know better than to wake up at 3 a.m. on a 5th Wednesday. You manage that. There are doctors out there who will help you stay asleep on that night when it comes. If something goes majorly wrong and you do awaken, then you close the door on them. Sure, people who are brave like Jen might answer the door, but who in their right mind would get out of the bed and open the door if they knew there was going to be someone who looked just like them waiting there? Krista and Mike laughed and told me at that point you have no choice. Time seems to slow down once you're at the phase where there's a person on the other side of the door. They'll keep knocking and no time will pass until you get up and answer. You won't be able to get back to sleep. I got home, still reeling from this conversation. I did some Google searches and saw that yes, this is something most people know about. Reddit has plenty of posts from people looking for ways to stay asleep on the 5th Wednesday. There are a few who left comments suggesting they had never heard about this, but we were definitely in the minority. How had it never happened to me? I'm a light sleeper. I've suffered from insomnia my whole life. That said, I don't typically stay up all night. I'm more of a kind of person that lays awake for a few hours and finally drifts off around 2 a.m. Maybe that saved me. I called my mum and asked her about it. She said sure, she knew what I was talking about. She was surprised I didn't remember. I asked what she meant. She said around the age of 5, I began telling her about my experience of waking up at 3 a.m. on the 5th Wednesday to find that everyone gone. She and my dad worked to try and keep me asleep, but I was willful. I would pretend to take my cough syrup and then dump it in the sink when they turned away. I'd lie and pretend to fall asleep so they'd leave me alone. My mum would stay up all night to protect me, but eventually this started to wear on her and she had no choice but to stop. A few months later, I told them about the knock on the door. No one came to call. My mum said it was the strangest thing. She said my dad told me that the next time this happened, I needed to close the door in the face of whoever was waiting. She even consulted a child psychiatrist. He met with me several times and worked with me to get close to the door in the face of the identical version of me, if and when it happened. The next 5th Wednesday came, but not until the next school year. My parents and my psychiatrist coached me to close the door, to go back to my room when I saw the person on the threshold. I went to bed, and they all felt confident that I would do the right thing. My mum said I was cheerful the next morning, and she asked me why. That's when I told her I was happy because the door opened for me, and I had walked through it. I don't remember any of that. Come to think of it, my first memory isn't until later that year.